Over this last week or so, as we got the news of Bobbi Anderson's death, those of us who knew Bobbi and loved her did what we do after news like this, which is we remembered and told stories about Bobbi. And that was actually one of the gifts of this time of grief. Many people spontaneously telling me just what a gift it was to get to know Bobbi Anderson. Many people speaking of her warmth and her smile and how easily she giggled and how formidable a presence she could be sometimes. So a lot of things at once. And as I listened to all those stories, I started to wonder, well, actually, as Julia just did now, I started to wonder what are the lessons of Bobbi Anderson's life, maybe the lessons for us to take forward. And three themes popped up for me as I wondered about her life. It's not an exhaustive list. I don't think it could be an exhaustive list, but there are three things that I'd like to wonder with you today. And I think that Bobbi's life was defined in many ways by generosity, by fidelity, and by wonder. So three things I'd like to think about: generosity, fidelity, and wonder. Generosity. To wander around Grace Memorial is to encounter one thing after another given by the Anderson family. So there is a water fountain in the hall outside the parish hall, which is dedicated, I think, Joy, am I right in saying, to Bobbi's grandparents? You can see we're partway through refinishing this stage and repairing this stage, and we were partway through working on it, and someone said, the Andersons gave that stage. And Bobbi and Dick were part of the team that back in the 1980s bought the parking lot. An incredible act of foresight and stewardship. In fact, in many ways, it would be simpler to list off the gifts that Bobbi and Dick and the wider Anderson family didn't give to Grace Memorial. If you have walked around this building, odds are very good that you have passed through a gift given by the Andersons. If you ever participated in the catechumenate, or a similar time of Christian preparation or training, you may have heard someone ask the question, what is the definition of a sacrament? In the course of that work, someone may have said, this is what a sacrament is. And does anyone remember what the definition of a sacrament is? Well done. So it is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual state of grace. And there are official sacraments that the church holds. Depending on who you ask, there's either 2 or 7 of them. But theologians hold that there are far more symbols of God. There are thousands of places where we encounter outward and visible signs of God. And I want to suggest that all of these gifts that Bobbi gave here at Grace and in the wider community were outward and visible signs of grace. She lived this life of kindness, of curiosity, of delight, of joy, known not just in this church, but at the dog park, in her family, in all of these places. She shared this delight and joy and wonder. It was generous with love. There is an old-timey song, I guess it's old-timey now, called The Magic Penny. Maybe some of you will know that. And the song, the theme of The Magic Penny is that love is like a magic penny, and that as you give this penny away, it turns out, how did that happen? It's back in my hand. The more you give it away, the more you continue to have the magic penny. And the song actually might not go far enough. We could argue that the more, that as you give away love actually multiplies. You end up with more coins than you started with. And I think that is one of the lessons of Bobbi's life, as she was generous in so many ways, generous with love, this love came back to her, and it was a big part of the reason that she was joyous. When I visited the Anderson home a few days ago, it was a delightful outward and visible sign. I'd never seen this anywhere before. When I'd visited the home of someone who died, there was a table out front with a sign on it letting the neighbors know that Bobbi had died. It's an invitation to leave a card for her, and there's a bowl of dog treats. So even in death, here is this generosity. I'll also note that there were some candies left over from Halloween. I think it was the first pastoral visit I've ever gone on where I was sent on my way with a Kit Kat bar. Wonderful. So generosity, this generosity of love, of kindness, of joy that came back to her and magnified her own joy and generosity and love. Fidelity. So we live in a time when there's maybe too many choices to have. So to decide that you want to buy a pair of trousers or a sewing machine or I don't know what, anything online, a tool online, is to be overwhelmed by the number of choices that there are out there. Heck, to choose what movie you want to watch tonight is to be overwhelmed by the number of choices out there. And perhaps as a consequence, many people today suffer from what the kids call FOMO, right? Which is fear of missing out. There's probably a better thing going on somewhere else right now. And if I commit to this one thing, I might miss out on the other thing that is really excellent. And I think FOMO is magnified because we also live in a season of unfriending. Literal and metaphorical unfriending. So if you voted a certain way, unfriend me now. If you did or didn't do something, unfriend me now. There's this escalating list of things which disqualifies for us from being in relationship. And it can be tempting with these two things put together, fear of missing out and that culture of unfriending together, to constantly hold back and say, I'm not going to commit to much of anything. I want to keep my options open. Which is exactly how Bobbi Anderson did not live her life. Right? Bobbi got married quite young by 2021 standards. She and Dick were married for 61 years. Oh my God. It's an amazing accomplishment. Bobbi stayed at the same church her entire life. Bobbi was friends with Jesus her entire life. And all of those things, I want to suggest, are major accomplishments. My late boss, Bill, said that any marriage that extends into 40 or 50 or 60 or 61 years is a monument to forgiveness. That line often gets a laugh, but I think it's laughter of recognition. Like, we get that to be married for that long is to forgive early and often. That's hard, and Bobbi, with Dick at her side, did it. To stay at the same church for 85, was she 85? 85 years is not a small accomplishment either. Bobbi loved Grace Memorial, and there were times when Grace Memorial left her frustrated and disappointed. Of course it did. Right? This is a community of human beings, and we have silly power struggles and foibles and all the things that come with being alive. But Bobbi remained with this fidelity to this place. And Bobbi had this fidelity to Jesus that lasted across 85 years. And sometimes we talk as though loving Jesus would be about the easiest thing there is. And sometimes loving Jesus is the easiest thing that there is. But there's other times when Jesus is confusing, or says weird stuff, or strangely silent, or asks us to do hard things. But Bobbi loved Jesus anyway. So here's the question. Earlier we said that Bobbi smiled a great deal and giggled easily and was full of joy. Was she full of joy in spite of the fact that she committed to these things? In spite of her deep fidelity? Or was it the opposite? That she found these things to which God was calling her, marriage to Dick, this church, love of family and of friends and of dogs, Jesus, and just stuck with them. Perhaps there's a lesson for us as we sit with fear of missing out, that we should also be on guard against the fear of missing out on committing to something deeply. There's something amazing and life-giving about choosing something and staying with it across the decades. So last of all, wonder. How many sentences could you complete if I gave you the starting words, Bobbi Anderson loved, ... So Bobbi Anderson loved Dick. Bobbi Anderson loved her parents and grandparents and her children and her grandchildren and cousins and friends. Bobbi Anderson loved dogs. Bobbi Anderson loved music. Bobbi Anderson loved being in Portland. Bobbi Anderson loved this life. She made this choice to see wonder in life, and that is, I think, one of the things that invited her into joy. And she might not have felt wonder. I mean, if you think about just historically the stuff Bobbi lived through, it would be very reasonable if she didn't feel a whole lot of wonder or a whole lot of love or a whole lot of joy at all. So she's born into the Depression. As a child, she sees World War II. She sees the murder of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy. She sees the carnage of 1968. She lives through how many decades in which folks figured, many people thought we were on the verge of nuclear annihilation. We could just keep going with these lists of hard things she's witnessed. And as we saw in her biography or obituary, she had a lot of health struggles as well. The last number of years of her life were hard. So we could have forgiven Bobbi for being embittered or angry all the time or full of resentment or saying, life is sort of pointless. And she did not. She chose wonder. It's the Austrian psychologist Viktor Frankl who writes a book that went through a couple titles, and the final title was called Man's Search for Meaning. It's a fine title for a book, but I am of the opinion that Frankl should have stuck with the title he had chosen before that, which roughly translates from the German to English as saying yes to life in spite of everything. And that's what Bobbi did. She said yes to life in spite of all of this hardship in the broader society and all of the things she struggled with in her own life. She still made this choice to say yes to wonder. So generosity, fidelity, and wonder. 3 lessons, not all of the lessons by any means of Bobbi Anderson's life, but 3 lessons for us. On an occasion like this, at a funeral, we say we are proclaiming the resurrection. And part of what we mean by the resurrection is that some 2,000 years ago, God proved to be bigger than death. And part of what we mean by resurrection is that Bobbi is with God and alive now. But a third thing we mean by resurrection is that we're invited to live in a way that calls the kingdom nearer. The wonderful poet Wendell Berry would say we're invited to practice resurrection. So in the coming days and weeks and months and years, as you mourn Bobbi Anderson, practice resurrection. Practice resurrection through generosity. Give away some gifts. Give away some outward and visible signs of love. Give them to elders, give them to children, Give them to neighbors. Give them to dogs at the dog park. Give them to strangers who probably don't deserve them. Practice fidelity. With the help of other people, pray about and think about and listen to where God is calling you, and then go all in. Give your heart to it. Commit to the vocation that God is inviting you into. And wonder, in spite of everything, in spite of how hard this life is sometimes, don't forget that it is so, so beautiful. There is so much love, there is so much delight, there are so many wondrous surprises. Choose to say yes to them. And as you practice resurrection, you may find that Bobbi is with you, and that together you're inviting the kingdom just a little nearer.